Hello, Slobodan.
Hello, Christian. Hello, Stunty. Everyone.
What's going on? So I'm really happy we got the chance to do that. Now, Slobodan, it took a little while, but I think it's good because we had to prepare a few things, and although I was already quite familiar with the label, you allowed me to get even more, go deeper in what you've released in the past 15 plus years now. And I must say that most new pages I turn on the God book has been really, really satisfying. What are we listening to right now?
I'm not sure. I cannot actually recognize. But can I can I please ask you to turn just a little bit down the volume?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Um, yeah, right at the beginning. Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon. It depends where we are. Thank you, Christian, for inviting me, and thanks for allowing me to be part of this magnificent podcast series, which is really an amazing idea, and you do it really. It's really amazing, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And thanks everyone who's watching this, who's investing time, and or people who are interested in this kind of weird musical things. Yeah, I think what we are listening now is an excerpt from my latest record, which is called Elements, that was released in 2022. So that's my last proper record. It's basically a huge piece for a couple of instruments. They are bass clarinet, they're cello, horn, harp, piano, and some electronics that I did on the top of that. So and the whole ensemble is also like the sound is completely processed through one delay, and there are also some samplers there, drums, etc., etc. The whole piece is like 45 minutes, and yeah, it's kind of a trippy contemporary music, I would say.
It is contemporary music, and what's really cool about it, and yes, I say cool, is that you're, as we'll get deeper into the label and the aesthetics and your um, your motivations behind it, you and I are about the same age, and so we have a very similar culture from like mainstream or popular culture from our youth, and we both ended up in avant-garde, modern classical, amongst other things. But what's interesting is what we keep from our youth punk years inside that is kind of exo to that culture traditionally, but it's starting to change in the past 20 25 years, I would say. And you've released some artists that are older than us that already inserted new techniques that were even more like punk than musique concrète, if we think about Philip Glass or Phill Niblock.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, I guess we'll just have you'll tell us a little bit more about you, who you are, where you're coming from, because you are based in Austria, in Graz, but you are not.
Correct.
You are a little bit exo from Graz as well.
Exo, or some people say ethno.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm coming from. I'm born in ex-Yugoslavia, which today is the part where I was born was is Bosnia, and I came to basically I'm interested in music like my whole life, And yeah, I came to Austria in 2002 by pure accident. I didn't have any idea where I was landing, I just knew, okay, I want to explore some music and I want to study composition. And then, yes, I landed here. The studies were great. I studied with Georg Friedrich Haas, who today is like one of the major contemporary composers. And I kind of stayed here because Austria is very nice, uh, very good country, very good destination for music, especially contemporary music. I'm living in Graz, which is second biggest city in Austria, in South Austria. Um, yeah, and Graz, what I can say, Graz is an amazing city. It has like 300,000 people. There is so much art and so much everything regarding art that it's pretty good place to be. It's Graz is most of the time in kind of a shadow of Vienna, because Vienna is of course this big capital. Of course, there is plenty of things. There are plenty of things happening in Vienna, but Graz is kind of a hidden diamond because so many good things are happening here all the time, basically. So yeah,
It's interesting because in many
cool town.
regards, oh yeah,
Sorry.
in many regards, Austria could be considered as the birthplace of Western music. And at the same time, you have also some of the most pagan music coming from Austria. I'm talking about our dear, recently departed Hermann Nietzsche,
Correct.
and who's a very important figure for this stream, at least, for this channel. And but so you explain how you moved to Austria, but music didn't start with Austria for you, obviously.
hmm Yeah, of course. When you come from countries, one of the countries that were part of ex-Yugoslavia, of course, my musical interest was also kind of connected to the music that was available there. First of all, the music that was available in at places where I grown up, because surrounded with all stuff happening around. So yeah, I was of course influence of music that was happening in Yugoslavia. Of course, you start. I Your first record is not experimental music record, and the music that I released afterwards on other records. I started with pop music, of course. I started with pop music, with funk things, but I was always kind of interested in. I was always looking for, let's say, some weird, strange sounds in rock music. So because that was my way into, when I'm thinking right now, that was my way into contemporary music. So I'm not sure if you are you ready for the shock? What was my first record?
I'm never ready, but like, who cares?
Okay, so everyone,
Ah, and who produced that record, huh?
uh, who produced the record?
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know. Those are the remixes. So the
Yeah.
Shep
Ah, okay. Yeah. Shep Pettibone, who
Shep Pettibone, yeah.
who's not as mainstream as Madonna, which is why Madonna
Correct.
has always been interesting, because
hmm
she hired always, or most of the time, be like the people that we don't see on MTV when we see her.
Correct.
It's
Correct.
not the worst people usually. Not
Yeah,
to say
I
that
think
Madonna is like an experimental music champion, but still.
she's not experimental music champion, but this record, this is the record which is called "You Can Dance," and this is the remix record. So those are like her hits. The record is from 1987, and those are the some of the hits that were remixed. And why this record? I always show this record, of course, a little bit as a fun, because many people think, okay, Madonna cannot sing and that kind of stuff, but she can. The talent that she has is to find good people, and she's totally clever. What amazed me, like when I think in retrospect with this record, is this is the first music. Of course, this is really the first music that I like had on tape available, and accidentally, I those are like long songs, 7, 8 minutes, 9 minutes, like in the nature of remixes. But what I heard for the first time in this record were all kind of electronic effects, delays, reverbs, rhythm machines, strange synthesizer sounds, uh, every kind of, let's say, tape modulation, tape cutting. So this for me, I think, and I heard this record with, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old. So when you listen to this kind of music and that age, it surely is doing something with your brain. So I think that record, thanks Madonna, how do you say it in English? Make like open my brain to let's say experimental sounds and experimental art, experimental way of thinking. So it's not necessarily like, I mean, those are songs. It's like
Yeah,
melodies,
and
but
it's not
it's
like you were looking for something experimental. It's
correct.
just that
Yeah,
it was in the air around you, and
correct.
you
Yeah,
built a sensibility to it. Maybe starting
correct.
there.
Correct. Yeah, and that
Mm.
was like when you listen to that, as I said, with 5 year old, when you're 5 year old. So that's pretty a thing. That's yeah. That's how it started, and then later, of course, there were some other Yugoslav bands, of course, that were available at the time, and of course all those 60s 70s prog rock experimental stuff. I don't know, King Crimson. I remember at some point I got Sonic Youth records, and that blew me away, of course, especially those 90s experimental jet set, Trash and No Star, and my favorite Sonic Youth, which is Washing Machine from 95. And there was one seminal record of Sonic Youth where they covered composers of 20th century. The record is
Yes.
called the Goodbye 20th Century. They released it
Ah,
on their own label. And that was for me, that was like the first record that was available for me, because at that time in Bosnia, we had these copies, CD copies. They were no originals or things like that. And we got Sonic Youth records, and we also got that one record because they didn't know what that is. It was just, okay, Sonic Youth is gonna sell. And for me, that was the first time where I saw Christian Wolf. Um,
the
I
famous
knew
guitar player in avant-garde music from New York, Christian Wolf.
correct,
Yeah.
yeah, correct. Christian Wolf, John Cage, who's else? Yoko Ono, of course, which is who is one of my heroes. Yeah.
There we have the Beatles connection for the man. But as Stevan here in his comment reminds me, already another connection: Madonna, Sonic Youth, the Chichon Youth LP.
Correct. That's correct. Ciccone Youth. Ciccone Youth. That's the record. I got that record a little bit later, but that's correct. And Sonic Youth had amazing cover of Into the Groove of Madonna, which is phenomenal. I like that very much.
But so, as everyone, you find your way into music, whatever way you get, even if it's maybe in a country where it's a little less accessible than in the UK, in France, in Sweden, in the US.
Mhm.
But at what point does music and musicianship enter your life?
I think I was always interested in music in one way or another. And you try, as I told you, my background comes from pop music, rock and roll, punk, and that kind of stuff. So you naturally begin to play with bands, as I did. I started to playing with bands, of course, some cover bands, etc., etc. Then yeah, then there were also some bands that we were doing like our own music, like experimenting. And yeah, as I told you, I pretty early had this I think affinity to experimental stuff, and that's how it started. And then at one point I somehow realized it's possible to study, like I wanted to go deeper into avant-garde music. And then of course um, you start with uh, I don't know. For instance, this was my let me show you this. The music is a little bit too loud, Christian, just saying. It's a little bit distracting. But this was,
Sorry
for
about that.
instance,
Yeah.
uh, uh, Eric Satie is one of my that's the guy where everything basically started. I found this is not the first record that I found with Satie's music, but I found this record. This guy is called Rex Illusivi. He's a guy from Novi Sad in today's Serbia.
Can you show it again?
Yes.
Wait, so we can read the name
Wait a
without
second.
the
I will
glare.
do this because we have reflections,
Parfait.
or even better like this.
All right.
Yeah. And on this record, there is an interesting composition which is called Thanks Mr. Rorschach. And he took piano music of Eric Satie, played by this wonderful woman, and he put some ambiences and some tape modulations and some like music concrete over the Satie's music. And that was for me like really the beside Sonic Youth, that was like the first really experimental music that was available to me at the time by basically by pure accident. And yeah, that's how it started. And then I got some books about 20th century composers. And the thing is that I started to study that book, and the book was like full of these abstract scores. But the problem was that I didn't, the music was not available to me. So I had a problem. I had some abstract scores, and I had some descriptions how that music is composed and how the music should sound. But the recordings were not available. So okay, then we had a problem. And I also think that way I also kind of discovered a little bit my love to abstract art in general. Yeah. And then of course with the time I found some music. I found some Stockhausen, Cage, and that kind of stuff. And by that time I was already in Graz, and of course here was everything available, still without internet, without YouTube and that kind of stuff. But there was a huge library with all those recordings from Donaueschingen and all those contemporary 20th century music. Everything was available more or less. So, and that was it basically. Yeah.
And when was that? What year was that? Around what year did you?
I moved to Graz in 2002.
So in 2002,
Yeah.
there was not that many people interested of our generation in that music. It was not like these records were disappearing from the shelves as they are doing right now.
Yes, so that was the perfect time to buy those vinyls because they were like the lowest price at that time.
Yeah.
I know that because I also bought many vinyls in, like, let's say like at the turn of the century for like very low prices, and they are now of course very expensive. Yeah.
And which is also like one of the things that is the reason why we're talking today is obviously like, I mean, it's a given, but you have a label, you are a musician, you release vinyl records.
Mhm.
So since 2009 you've been releases quite a few albums of your own music. You also have bands and different projects where you play in, where you're not necessarily the main composer or exclusively that. And from I haven't heard every single record you've done, but I've heard quite a few from different areas, and obviously there's a growth, a quite evident growth between your first records. On my Friday stream last week, you saw I played your first solo album, which still has this kind of, if I'm being a bit cheeky, I would say like that kind of teen angst in a way, a little bit. Like,
Of course.
yeah. And what we were listening to right now is very different, but still there are a lot of connections.
Yes, that's correct. The thing is that I, at that time of the record that you played, I had like two projects. One was that kind of trippy music with vocals, very score and Godflesh influenced,
Yeah.
where I was singing like kind of this. There was one brilliant comment. I don't know who's the guy, but thank you for this brilliant comment. Monks on mushrooms.
Yeah.
That's that. I cried. It was phenomenal. It was just on point. So that
For
was
those
one.
who haven't watched the stream, when I played that very long track Slobodan did in 2009, I believe, or 10, someone commented, like people were commenting, and one people commented that sounded like monks on mushrooms.
That was brilliant.
Mm.
That was really brilliant. So thank you for that. Yeah, and that was kind of one of the projects one of two projects, and the other project was that I composed. I released composed music, like
This is
really
the
not
record in
strictly
question,
not
by the
written.
way.
Yeah. So if you show us, yes, the edge, you see that's my surname Kajkut, and that's Ypsilon. So that's Ypsilon on Cyrillic. So that's the Ypsilon on Cyrillic is actually U, the letter U.
Okay.
So those are two distinguished things. So, and that's how it started. It confused. I think it confused a little bit some people because I was doing two things in parallel. So yeah, it made a little bit of confusion. Like, okay, what are you doing now? Are you chanting like a monk on mushroom, or are you being a serious composer and doing serious stuff?
I'm sure a lot of people have commented on that with you, right?
Yeah, and those are the remixes of the.
Yeah, but I mean the pinups comment there that I put on screen.
Yeah, let me see. Yes, it's Cyrillic. That's correct.
No, the one that it's like the cover of Justice.
I think that yes,
Because of the cross, but yeah.
yes, correct. I think it was either at the same time as this Justice record or a little bit after. I'm not sure.
A little bit after, I think they started around 2006,
Yeah.
2007. But
Yeah.
you also had that record that came out right after that. Kind of like, if it was not clear where you were coming from, that record explains it all. When you look at the name of the collaborators,
Yeah,
namely
correct.
James Plotkin from Old, and who was part of probably the album that most people got introduced to Scorn with, and Brian Lesmord, and KK Null, and someone else who I didn't know. Was it Option?
Option, yes, that's the guy from Graz. Amazing electronic musician, and there is also I also released one of his records on God Records. It's totally amazing. He's also one of big fans of Scorn, and that's our meeting point. I kindly suggest everyone to, if you are into that kind of sound, so please listen to Option. It's really amazing, low level, low sub bass, trippy beat music.
Yeah. So the early music that I just showed, yeah, it has ambient, dub, industrial, music that is kind of like monotonous a little bit, and gloomy, but not only. There's more layers to that. Was that just a project, or was that like the ground where you're starting from to go to where you are now, or where you went next? Do you see like all projects separately, or is it still Kajkut who, by the way, I'm very happy that after all these days that preparing for that, like I have no problem saying your name. I will remember it forever, which at first is not very intuitive to say this
Right.
for me, but now it's a mother tongue.
Correct.
But yeah, so did you approach all, like, because you've had now under Slobodan Kajkut name, what, 6-7 albums since then?
I have wait a minute. I have 3 records of this project that you played with singing.
Yeah.
So that was one kind of separate project, only with my surname with Cyrillic, and plus the one remix record that you showed now with the white box, and everything else. I think there are 6 or 7 records I have on my own name, and that's kind of composed, like really structured, composed, let's say contemporary music, which doesn't have nothing to do with this singing project. Yeah, and I also did some 7-inches, and those are also, they also belong to this composed kind of thing. And this project with singing, I more or less finished it. I kind of yeah, not that I'm run out of ideas. It's just it feels for me a little bit finished. So
yeah, I understand. It makes sense.
Yeah, at the moment I'm really like into really strictly composed, structured music. What I was basically studying. Yeah.
Someone, Jan here, is asking that he says that he saw on Kajkut the choir was recorded by Goran Trashkovsky, and he's asking you if he's also sang and if you like Anastasia and Mitsar.
Yes, Goran Trajkovski is a very, very dear friend of mine and collaborator. He recorded the choir. That's correct. And of course, I like Anastasia. I actually managed with Christian. I will show you some ex-Yugoslavian records that I like and that I suggest you. And this is one of the records of Goran Trajkovski. This band is called, wait a second. This band is called Aporea.
Yeah, no way I would have said that reading that.
Yeah, this is a re-release. This record was actually released as a tape in the end of 80s. And this is a re-release on one, I think, in Italian label. And this is the main influence of my project with singing, like and Anastasia, of course. This is the Anastasia, of course, is project afterwards from the 90s. This is their third and last record from 1998. It's called Nocturnal, and this is one of the most important records that I ever heard, because this is very intelligent mixture of like orthodox chants with let's say glitch electronica music. And this record, not many people like this record because they did it's very different from how they started. But for me, this is one of the greatest record for me I ever heard, and very big influence. And I don't know who asked it. Jan. Yes, Jan. I even played it with Mizar. I played 4 concerts 20 years ago with them.
So how did you, like, can you tell us in your own words, like the transition from doing music inspired by Scorn, ambient, dark ambient, noise, to written music, modern composition? Even if I consider that what you do is kind of a sort of, it's not traditional modern classical written music, even if I want it to be part of that family canon. But I think it's also good to acknowledge that it's it's not just adjacent. It's fully part of that. I don't know at all. We haven't talked yet if you have actually studied composition and all that, but like to a certain degree, I would expect, even if you were self-taught, that you must have studied that, obviously.
Yes, I finished compositional studies like completely, and with some of the guys that were like really uh, one of the masters, one of very very recognized composers, and yeah, so that's, and you asked, yeah, I did it parallelly. For instance, when I did this record with singing, I was like in parallel I composed like typical like chamber music. So that was for me like you go two parallel streets, you just switch from one street to another. For me that was very natural, as just like, I don't know, listening to Madonna and Sonic Youth. So that for me, that's it. That
For
it's
someone,
just a switch.
uh, would you agree that, or agree? How do you feel about the fact that probably most people wouldn't find this as easy a transition as you did? And would you have some advice for people to maybe like let go of the baggage, the bias people might have culturally to this kind of music? Because I believe that what you're doing with your label is actually helping the cause, if there was such a thing. But and that's what I hope we can achieve a little bit here. But we have to acknowledge that it's not like it's a battle that has to be fought in a way
Mhm.
for a lot of people. Hearing you saying that this was very natural, um, I suspect we could go a little bit deeper into that.
Um, I think that's a matter of it's simply a matter of of personality. I don't have problem with. Uh, I simply like different. I consider to have very versatile taste, and for me that's completely normal. Like this, it's this thing called, some people call it crossover. There is in contemporary music, for instance, there are many composers, especially young composers now, that are actually influenced with pop music, and they in their very structured compositions they integrate, let's say, some phenomenons from popular music, either with video or with techno beats or with heavy metal. For instance, I have there was a release on God Records from composer called Bernard Ganter, who is
Bernard
actually
Gunther from Australia, if I remember correctly. Who
he's from Austria, and he's basically what he's doing. He's writing metal music for ensemble modern,
Yeah,
things
but
things like
wasn't
that.
he?
So,
I remember him from the late '90s, early 2000s, doing the most silent music ever.
correct, correct. Some of his pieces were very yes, correct, at the time, end of '90s, beginning of the century, of 21st century, very 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 silent. Yeah,
Like the
but
most
basically,
minimalist music you could ever think of.
correct, yeah. But basically, he told me he doesn't listen to classical music at all or contemporary music. He only listens to metal.
Oh, okay.
So there are people that are open.
Yeah.
Not everyone, of course. That's really not. It's not for everybody. But I know certain composers, or for instance, one of my dear friends, Bernard Lang, who I also released on God Records. He's also like a bit Godflesh fan or Big Magma fan or Amontul. He's a huge Motorhead fan. So, and he's like he writes like one opera a year, for these big opera houses and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, but let me hazard like a guess. He probably doesn't like. Um, oh, I had the name in my head like 2 seconds ago. Um, Dream Theater,
uh,
which is
I
like
don't think
this
so.
symphonic metal. I would hazard that's like, because you just named Godflesh, which is,
Yeah.
it is metal, but it's also very raw. Uh, Same with Motorhead. It's something that is not about like, because a lot of time metal, people think metal is interesting because of the technique, because of like the dexterity. which I believe real
Correct.
musicians don't care really much about.
Well, I don't know about Dream Theater. That's really not the band I would listen to, but I think all this, like, let's say, like progressive, let's say, complicated music, or however you call it. Later it was called math rock in 90s and things like that.
Yeah.
I think everything, most of those things are coming from King Crimson.
King Crimson and probably Frank Zappa.
Frank Zappa, yes, of course, but I think King Crimson was the band.
I agree.
Also, my personal influence, but I think this because Robert Fripp is obviously one of the most intelligent guys in pop music, rock music. So,
Yeah, pop music.
yeah, and I think this how he transformed his musical language, this transitional period of King Crimson, about 72, 73 into 74. I think that was the main, like that's when everything regarding all those complicated, even metal bands, yeah, that's where everything started. Someone says in the comments, Tool.
Yeah.
Well, Tool was 20 years later than King Crimson. So, and
In your
no
face,
offense,
Phil.
please, no offense.
Yeah. So I think you didn't tell me that, but I think I kind of understood that you're also teaching music right now.
Correct, correct. Yeah, I'm teaching at music department in music and university in Graz. Yeah, that's correct.
And what are you teaching?
I teach couple of subjects. Some music theory stuff, like basics of music theory, which is theory. And I also teach oral training, which is like hearing and things like that. I teach compositional techniques of 20th century. The thing that I really do passionately. I'm really interested in that. I'm teaching contemporary notation for musicians. So we speak about different notation techniques of the 20th century, mostly complex stuff. And last year, I started something interesting. I don't know if I mentioned to you. I basically started a subject which is called experimental tendencies in pop music.
Okay.
And that subject is dealing with experimental pop music. So I'm starting with, let's say, Beatles doing Musik concrète. Then I speak about Zappa, of course, Velvet Underground, 70s prog rock stuff, and then I'm covering 80s, what happened in the 80s with Sonic Youth, let's say with I don't know. Somebody in the comments mentioned Glenn Branca. Of course, Glenn Branca is one of those composers that are completely overlooked. I really don't understand how is that possible.
But just quickly before you continue on that. So
Yeah,
most of what you teach is for musicians, and you
correct.
also have this course that is more about a certain sociological, historical aspect of music. That
Correct.
obviously someone younger than someone who's 60-year-old would be better suited to teach, which you are.
I also teach composers. I also teach composers, not that much, but I have one class of composers. That's very funny and very very challenging because they are very good.
Hmm.
Yeah, correct.
But yeah, so that class about like basically where experimental music enters the mainstream, basically.
Sorry, say it correct. I didn't understand you.
So basically, you were talking about that class where you like, if
Yeah,
I understand you correctly, where you teach at what points and with which examples experimental music uh, bleeds into more popular mainstream music.
correct, correct. So I basically what I do is I start with how classical music and avant-garde music influenced pop music. For instance, it's very well known that Beatles were very into avant-garde, and of course Yoko Ono is one of avant-garde mothers. We know that of course the whole background of Frank Zappa and his fascination with Varese and 12-tone music, and then we have, like, at King Crimson we have examples of this Bela Bartok
Yeah.
rhythmical stuff, and of course then vice versa happened through the history, because let's say modern classical composers started to introduce influences of pop music into their musical languages. And the people that we mentioned, which is like Bernhard Gander and Bernhard Lang, those are typical examples of this bleeding, some people say crossover of those.
Yeah, like Carl Stone and I guess even Steve Reich.
Absolutely. Robert Ashley, Terry Riley, Philip Glass. I mean, to some extent, like Philip Glass, it's also, for me, has this kind of popular. So it's not a taboo anymore. Yeah, it started actually with jazz. It started with jazz because some composers were composing for jazz ensembles. I think Milton Babbitt composed a piece for, I forgot what's the name of the piece, but he composed for a jazz ensemble. Or some people introduced jazz ensembles into classical orchestras. They blended those two. So there are very many examples outside. Yeah.
And I'm sure you know also about the famous example of Charlie Parker chasing Varese in the streets of New York to teach him modern composition.
Sure.
But while, like, someone was asking if you include in this like music that is not from the Western world, like Asia, Latin America, Africa.
Oh,
sorry.
Can you you mean this, what we talked about this bleeding? I try to, but I have to be honest, I started this subject in October, so it's very fresh. But what I do is, so I'm not doing Latin America and Asia, and of course I act a little bit like an ignorant European. But what I do is I have many international students. So I asked them to present some experimental music from their own countries. So I had one student presenting like pop music from Iran at end of, I think, middle of 70s. I forgot what was the artist that he presented, but that's how I introduce, or at least I try to introduce, because I'm very aware that we Western civilization are not the beginning of
What?
I don't know, of avant-garde music, because you know this example that the first musique concrète was actually recorded musique concrète was this Egyptian guy.
There's so many ways to, yeah. I know about it. I think that in a way, you know, there's, like, with avant-garde music, it's so complicated sometimes because some of it was just fun experimentation. Like, for example, was Léon sorry, the what's the name of, you know, the instrument? Was Léon Theremin a musician, or was he actually a security engineer? I think he was actually a security engineer who was commissioned a motion detector by a bank in Russia. And then the whole way we present him as a musician and all that, who knows? Because a lot of that, yeah.
Correct. There are many civilizations, like you cannot cover everything, but
and also,
at least try not. Yeah.
If we go to a closer extreme of this, like, what is this? Is there thinking behind it, or is it just like a punk gesture? When you look at the first Revolting Cocks album, which is an offshoot of Ministry, etc., the first album by the Revolting Cocks was them buying a sampler, and without reading ever for a second the manual, the first 3 days of them experimenting empirically with the sampler, that's the first album. So what is it? Is it a joke? Is it serious? Like, how are we to take it? There's not one answer. Of course, you are like the listener, the one who decides what it you take from it. But it's still interesting that, like, in the Western world, we always value intent very high. I personally do. But you have to acknowledge, especially, like, if you remember when in the late 90s we started to have the plugins in music assisted by computers, that you would write this beautiful melody, and then it would be like you put a plug on it, and it would be like you threw this melody in a cauldron of magic potion, and something amazing came out of it. But if you're honest, how do you connect the result you're hearing with what you actually threw it in? Like, how much is you're making? And often there was not much connecting it to your original intent, but the result was amazing, and you were the one who threw the melody in the magic cauldron. So all these, these dynamics of, like, ownership, intent, and all that, I think is something way more fluid now than it was even like 20 years ago.
Yeah, of course, when those first electronic devices appeared, of course people were experimenting and like, okay, what this machine can do and how do I do it? Of course, it's and when today when we listen to that, let's say like older music, especially you see there are many re-releases from old music. It's kind of sounds like kind of exotic thing. Okay, how was it? How it sounded before, or I'm always interested in how people how much primitive music. Let's say this typical example is um, let's say electro pop music from the 80s with these primitive drum machines.
Yeah.
And I observe all those bands that were active in 80s, like very obscure minimal electro bands, that kind of revival in last couple of, yeah. So somehow I have a feeling that there is probably a little bit of a nostalgia. Then I also noticed that because let's say the whole music, let's say from Eastern Europe, was for a long time not available to the Western world, and
Yeah.
suddenly people are exploring and are very interested in, okay, how was it behind the Iron Curtain, and this had kind of this exotic thing. So those are, I don't know, psychological phenomenons that, yeah, there is, I think it's a big discussion why is it exactly like.
And maybe we have that discussion, but another time. That could be actually
Great,
fun.
great.
But what I'm curious about is, as you're a composer, you're a teacher, you're writing, recording modern classical music.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah. And traditionally, music, that kind of music, lives by being performed.
Correct.
What is your relationship with your music being performed? How do you write it? Like, what is the intent you have from that perspective of that music being performed live to an audience?
Well, I think it's important to distinguish two things. There are composers who get commissions, like
Yeah.
commissions, and with those commissions you also get the setup, the ensemble who's commissioning you, or the festival, or whatever, and then you write for that specific occasion and that for that specific specific lineup, specific musical, yeah, musical ensemble. And there are other composers that compose for themselves. That's my thing. When I have one idea, I try to listen to what's in my brain, what's in my heart, and then I'll write it down. I basically wrote 90% of my pieces. I didn't write many pieces, to be, I'll let's say it quite often open. but when I write something, I try to listen. Okay, what's the sound I want to work with, and then when I write something, I try to find money, of course, to record it, to get the musicians to rehearse and that kind of stuff, to make a concert, and that's basically it. Yeah,
I
and
mean,
yeah,
because until I would say the the 90s, maybe I don't know the timeline exactly, but that music mostly lived thanks to live performance or radio broadcasting. Now, how, like for the music, like there's a distinction between the the necessity of playing the music live and the necessity for the composer to earn money, which
correct.
are two different dynamics. Both are crucial, but as you release your music, you have control of it. The music you compose, if you decide it's good enough, you will release it, and it will find an audience over time. Back then, it was maybe a little bit more complex, and like outside influence, like state um, institutions, played a bigger role. How does the institution play a role in your everyday life as a composer and recording artist?
Which kind of you mean funding
Yeah,
institution?
funding or concert halls. Uh, like I know there's also some agencies that place composers' work for orchestras in national orchestras and stuff like that. Like the whole business aspect of being a modern classical composer.
It's very individual. It's very individual. For instance, when I apply for funding, that's the only criteria is that it has let's say kind of cultural impact. And I mean the fundings I'm getting, those are not like big fundings. Those are really tiny micro fundings, so that I'm actually free to do whatever I want. Um, when you work with institutions, of course, it depends from the institution. Let's say typical example is an opera. Opera is a big conglomerate house. So there are instances. When you write opera, you have to do with somebody that writes the libretto. You have to do somebody who's doing direction, uh, choreography, and that. So this is a huge. You are just one tiny person that basically doesn't have any influence. You deliver your music, you deliver your score, and that's basically it. Of course, some composers have, if you are, let's say, have this kind of authority, you can influence other things. But yeah, it depends where you are. Where you compose for the orchestra, it's you have a specific orchestra. I remember my teacher told me once, I have one compositional method for, let's say, Cleveland Symphony Orchestra, and I have one compositional method for, let's say, I don't know,
Boston Orchestra.
Boston, I don't know, Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. So those are the, let's say, limitations of doing compositions that are commissioned. So it depends where you, what is your.
A lot of experimental avant-garde modern classical music that has been released
Mm,
was released after it had been commissioned for a specific purpose.
yeah.
Is it also valid for your music?
I think times changed because many stuff. Yeah, it depends. It really depends because in before, radios were like big institutions that also did commissions, and they also recorded the stuff, and then automatically they possessed those music. So
Hmm.
those were the only people that were allowed to release this kind of music. I think now it's a little bit more flexible. It depends how you negotiate with all those institutions. It depends. It depends. You said one thing. I forgot. You said one thing. The music lives from live performances. We had the difficulty now is we live in times when so much music is being composed and so much music is going to be composed. Unfortunately, for some reason, it's too much everything. It's simply too much everything, and 90% of I even dare to say 95% of all composed compositions today on all around the world are going to be performed only once.
Yeah.
Only once. And before YouTube, those stuff was like forgotten if it's not recorded. But luckily now we had YouTube, and there are many YouTube channels that uploading this music. So luckily we have at least that kind of document. But you are right, music, one of the ways for music to live is from live performances. Yeah, now we have at least this possibility to document, maybe not for a physical release, but for a digital release. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Sean here, the Vinyl Dreamscape, is asking, it's correlated, like, are the grant requests mostly to governmental or private sector corporate?
Oh, I only rip off government. That's my favorite hobby.
All right.
I only rip off governments. No problem with that. I have no morals.
The other way to document your music and to give it a chance is to release it, which is what you do. You have this label that has now, in 15 years, about like close to 80 releases, I believe now, all on vinyl, if I'm correct, which is quite unusual for a label that is mostly perceived, which is not like totally correct, but as a modern classical avant-garde label. This was something that you could say maybe Alga Margen was doing already. There's you. There's not that many labels that have at least created such a body of work. And what is very special with you is that while Alga Margen is either working with big names of the avant-garde or underground but cult names, you're doing both. You're doing three things actually. You're releasing rare, unreleased work by major avant-garde musicians. We'll go a little bit into that soon. You're releasing new artists, completely unknown. Some are friends of you, but like let's not talk too much about it. And you're also doing some archival work. I have one example specifically in mind, but which one out of these three ways of doing it that I've identified, what was the motor, the one motivation, the first motivation for starting the label for you?
It's for pure rational reasons. I made some music, and I wanted it to be released. And of course, it's not easy to. At that time, there were not so many labels. Of course, when I started God Records, there was no Bandcamp, and of course, discogs was also not existing. So there were like less informations, less labels, definitely less labels. Today we have more music, and we have more labels, we have more ensembles, we have more players, everything multiplied, kind of thing. And my wish was, because I'm not a vinyl collector. That's important to say. It's just why I'm doing vinyl is vinyl was my at that time I started to, let's say, when I started to listen to music, vinyl was one of the formats available. I didn't have CD up until 1997, I believe. So pretty late. It simply wasn't available. So vinyl was there, and I didn't pay attention. Is it vinyl? Is it kind of thing? This vinyl phenomenon, this psychological phenomenon about vinyl came later, after this digital fever. So I needed something to release on, and I told myself, okay, I will do it on my own. And my first records were actually collaboration with another Austrian label, which is called Fire Global Recordings. And that's how it started, basically. And there was always, because at that time I was already into very deep into avant-garde music and very aware of what's going on, especially in Austria. And at that point, I was like, I would love to have this particular piece on record. And that's how I started, basically. So my first releases of God records were only my releases, pure egoistical reasons. But of course, that doesn't. You cannot work like that. So
yeah, you don't make enough of an impact if you only release your own stuff.
Yeah, it's not only if you're established composer, then you can do it. John Zorn, for instance, that's how it works. But even his label releases, of course, other composers' music. Yeah,
and also John Zorn had, before he started Sadik, he had like 15 years of career before that, at least 10 years of career.
correct.
Like when Phill Niblock was doing his own label in the 70s, well, he only released like 8 records before he had to stop, and then he went on to work with a big label.
Yeah, the same with Brian Eno with discrete music. So
only 10 releases. Yeah,
only 10 releases. Yeah. So then I started, and a dear friend of mine, Bernard Lang, I was talking with him. I remember, like, the history of God Records starts with Laibach, actually, because I was at Laibach concert, and I met Bernard for a coffee afterwards, and he was like, yeah, I made an amazing piece with Philip Jeck. Like, Philip Jeck is one of the guys, of course. Yeah, and then out of the blue, I said, well, you should release it on vinyl somehow. And then he said, yeah, but what label and that kind of stuff. Then I said, yeah, I have a label. Then it was very spontaneous. And then we did this record, Tables Are Turned. No, this is, you don't have that record. I didn't send it to you.
No, I know. But you didn't send me that record. I bought it with my own money.
That's good. I have your money here. Thank you very much. And that's how it started. And then just and what I have to say is Graz is I consider Graz as a very musical city, and there are some amazing musicians and composers up here. It's really totally amazing. We are going to speak about some of them later, if you want.
Absolutely.
And it was very simple for me. I will release those people at the beginning, and I will see where it goes. I want to release those people because this is nice music, and I want to listen to this music from vinyl. I will
say one thing also for that might be interesting for all people here who are watching, and you are welcome to contradict me if you feel I'm completely crazy with that. But even today, starting a vinyl record label is not that expensive. It doesn't mean it's easy. Not being expensive and being easy are completely different, but it's not that expensive. If you have the drive to release 3-4 records, you will do it. That's not an impossible goal at all. To build a catalog, to start to build trust with distributors and stuff like that, that's a completely different affair. Then you have to start to be professional and smart, etc. But do you agree that starting the label, you really don't need to invest that much.
Yes, but there is another difficulty is that there are so many labels up there.
Yeah.
And there are so many releases up there. So it takes time. It took for God Records. It took.
Oh, releasing a record and selling a record, it's two different things. I agree.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not that easy. It's not that easy. I still have some records that I released 20 years ago. I have them still in my storage.
Yeah.
So it's that's the way it works. But the only thing is that the vinyl was cheaper before.
It's true, but I remember the very first record I released. I think, on this quite celebrated label in France called Versatile, that released mostly dance music, but not. There really is also music that you would have released, like the Emmanuel Paronin, the Ariel Calma stuff. But I remember every 2, 3, 4 years, they would actually take some of their stock and destroy it.
Yeah, I know some labels doing that, and that's the way it is. That's the way it is somehow.
Yeah,
it can happen.
It has happened on different scales forever in that industry.
Yeah.
Hopefully you don't need to do that, but sometimes it's the best choice, which sounds weird and like, oh, we love vinyl, like you should never do that. Give it to me, but yeah.
Yeah,
but,
I try not to destroy. I try to, when I have these sales, I try to give some presents. So, but about presents, we have presents at the end of the show, so people stay until the end of the show.
Yeah. We'll announce. There's Slobodan has a pretty good deal for you guys, and for you who are watching this not live, I guess we can do that for a month from now. It will be valid or so. Is it okay?
Yeah. We will manage somehow. Yeah. Sure.
So let's go a little bit in. First, I think since we've already covered a lot of your music, if you have something to add, please do. But of course, you started a label, and now we discussing this now 15 years after when you started and was no one in a way. You were just a friend of Bernard Long and had an idea of doing that. How do you manage to end up releasing stuff like that? How do you do it?
Yeah, that was my old fantasy. It's Morton Feldman. The first one that you showed was String Quartet number 2.
Yeah.
And the second one is that's the String Quartet number 2. And the second one is piano, violin, viola, and cello,
which is, in my opinion, one of the absolute top 5 best releases all genre of last year, according to me. You heard it first here. And what's interesting?
Thank you very much.
Oh, I mean, it's a fantastic. Yeah, because that's what's interesting. Morton Feldman, he passed away in 1989 or something.
87. Yeah.
87. Yeah. And he composed that in 1986, I believe, if I remember correctly. That was
he finished the piece like 3 months before he died, as far as I'm concerned.
So it was recorded once back then and released on CD, and you produced a whole complete new recording of it.
Correct, yeah.
Which is something that sounds like really ambitious, especially for independent label. Morton Feldman, who, for those who don't know, is a modern classical American composer that is quite unique. It's still very connected to traditional orchestral music in a way, but it is also very challenging. And this one in particular, as you said, that was concluded, that was finished 3 months before he passed away. This one is quite different from his other music, in my opinion. You can easily connect it to his body of work, but if you don't like his body of work, you might like this one actually, because it's not ambient music, but it's like orchestral music that is kind of anticipating a lot of the new ideas in ambient music that we got like 10, 20, 25 years after that, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Christian, may I just ask you one thing?
Yeah,
Maybe people that are watching us, maybe they have some questions so far. So
absolutely.
maybe
I
we
put
should.
them. I tend to put them up.
Yeah.
I'm. Don't worry about that. Yeah, and at one point, if anyone has a technical question, like just they know.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just maybe we can. Let me see. Maybe Oh, there are so many comments. Pwah,
Yeah.
pwah. People, thank you, thanks everybody. It's really such an honor, and I'm totally glad that there is so much interaction there. Okay.
But
Um,
so how do you? Because I guess Morton Feldman, he was already dead. He has an estate. A little bit of a complicated history also. Like he's not like a very clean human being in his own personal life. But never mind that. Like, how do you get to contact the estate, or how did it happen, and what were the difficulties?
no, you don't. There are no obstacles there because you only have to pay licenses.
Okay.
So that's not the problem. You pay the licenses, and that's it, because the music is available, music is written. So musicians buy the score, which is
Okay.
the license. The money goes to a publisher. The problem is only when you release orchestral music or big like big ensembles, like the music which is written for big ensembles, because those are length scores. You have to borrow the scores in order to play or record them. So that's not a big issue. Yeah, which is different with John Zorn, because he doesn't allow his music to be published
Yeah.
by other labels, which of course is totally understandable. Yeah,
On
so
that, like
Feldman was not a problem.
Kaylee here was asking, like, saying that he or she, I don't know, is waiting for the Feldman LPs from Force Exposure, especially specifically piano, violin, viola, and cello. They're asking you if you have an ETA.
What is ETA? I'm very sorry.
Let's be creative. What could an ETA be?
Electronic techno avant-garde.
ETA is a terrorist organization in the Basque Country as well. So who knows?
Oh,
It's
oh yeah,
estimated
correct.
time of arrival. Okay, that was not as fun as we hoped for.
Estimated time of arrival. Okay, Kaylee, thank you very much. I learned something now. Kaylee, the vinyls are on the way to forced exposure, so I suppose, let's say in 2 weeks at latest.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for Morton Feldman, no issue to get the rights and all that, but for this latest one, to assemble an ensemble to perform
Yeah.
it,
There
can you
was
tell
a
us about that?
Yeah, there is in Greece, in Thessaloniki, there is one amazing ensemble. Oh my God, what's their name? What's their name? Please read it on the record. I'm ashamed now.
Oh,
Oh God, I have so many informations in my head, so I can.
so at hand. Wait, what's the question?
What's the ensemble on the record? Oh my
Oh,
God,
yeah, the Dissonart ensemble.
Dissonant. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
they always
Yes.
have these creative names, huh?
Yeah, those are artists.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in a contact with the piano player, and she also did this wonderful recording for Bonita Marcus. That's the first Feldman record I released, and there was always kind of in the air that they want to do that piece, and then they connected with one of the festivals, which was co-founder of the project. And yeah, we they recorded it and we did it. So that's the story is pretty simple. I think the story about string quartet is maybe a little bit more interesting.
Let's go into that then. But because why I thought the story might be like interesting and enduring, because they also, like, I'm naive about that. I guess the ensemble just have to read the part, but I thought like they need to learn it. But how much do they need to learn it? How much do they need to rehearse it before you and before you also have to say, okay, this is good? Or did you feel like that you would be critical about the result, or how did you approach it, being a
I
producer?
I know the ensemble. I know
Mm.
how they play, and that's actually a great question, because with Feldman you can be a little bit let's say a little bit messy, because not every Feldman recording is. But I think that's a subjective. That's a personal taste, I think. I know those ensemble. I know those people, especially the piano player, and I believed them. So I tell them, okay, let's do it. And the impact of God Records was actually with mixing.
Okay.
So because I have to say I'm not really a fan of this big spacey reverb Feldman recordings, that there are plenty of them, So I really
Yeah.
wanted it to be, let's say, a little bit direct. That's especially for interesting for Bonita Marcus, because that's a really frontal recording, like really here.
I totally understand what you're saying, because like what struck me with these recordings, I had a few Morton Feldman records from the 70s, the 60s, 70s, and I liked them, but these ones that you produced, the sound cut through you directly. Like it's almost like musique concrète in a way. You really
Yeah.
feel there's the music, but the sound is also invading you besides the music, which I find very fascinating.
Yeah, that was a little bit also an idea. You asked how much did they rehearse. I got no idea, but those are contemporary music specialists, so I don't think that's a
Yeah.
big
So
big
about
thing.
the 6 LP box set, then what's
Yeah,
the story?
yeah. The story is this that's the longest string quartet in the history of contemporary music so far. The That's the string quartet that lasts for, depends on performance, but it lasts 5-6 hours. And I heard, I discovered Feldman quite early after I came to Graz, because before it wasn't available to me. Oh no, it was available. I had one piano record. That's yeah, correct. That I discovered that earlier. And in 2004, there was this string quartet, which is called Pellegrini String
Yeah,
Quartet. They are from Germany,
yeah.
and there was a concert in Graz of that piece. I still have a poster of that concert, and that was mind-blowing experience for me. Then I found the CD. The CD was on Mode Records, and it was played by Fuchs String Quartet, and that was for me. That was, I want to listen to this piece on vinyl. I cannot really explain why that pervert idea, because I already had some complaints because people want to listen Feldman in one piece. So flipping the record was a little, it's some people don't really like that. I accept that. That's totally
Mm.
fine for me. And that string quartet was my old fantasy. And that's funny enough. I was like going close to God Records catalog number 50. And I was thinking, okay, 50, it has to be something. Okay, let's make something. And it was totally spontaneous that I discovered somewhere this particular recording that's on the record. And then I thanks to internet, I searched a little bit about it. And I found out where was that recorded, and somehow I found out who was the guy that recorded this piece, this particular recording. And we contacted. I forgot his name. Sorry. And he sent me the data tapes of this recording, and I was actually and that was audience recording, like with data machine. And I was like, okay, this sounds good, but okay, And then he also gave me the program, liner notes of the concert. And I saw that, I think that was the Southwest German radio that recorded the piece. And of course, I contacted them and I said, okay, I want this, please. And it was pure luck, and it was really last minute. Actually, I planned to do Philip Jeck for 50th release. And then really last minute, I got this recording, and yeah, I did it. And it's the same string quartet that played in Graz, the concert that I listened to. It's their recording. I think they had a tour playing only this Feldman piece. Like they performed this piece 5 times in a very short period. I mean, you have to imagine.
Yeah.
Like playing 5 hours without a break and like slow music all the time, very contemplative. It did that. I mean, that's really, really hard for a musician. So that's a question for Feldman. There is this famous story that Feldman fell asleep at his own concert.
Yeah, and yeah, the concept of violence also in Feldman is interesting, but like that's a longer discussion. But there's one thing that is totally uninteresting but pragmatical, which I need to point out as well, is it's a box set with 6 LPs of extremely high quality, because I must say also, for that kind of music, you expect and you want really good cutting and of course pressing, and that's what you have. And I must say, you spoil me, you spoil us, because of you, I think it's normal to pay that kind of price for 6 LPs. And when I say that kind of price, I'm saying like something like, yeah, between 65 and 80 bucks for a 6 LP box set of extremely high quality music, limited of, yeah, it's in a way it's normal. But there are, like, for example, 3 years ago, Lamont Young released a box set of 3 LPs, a 3 LP string quartet as well. And yeah, that was 150.
Yeah, but Lamont Young is notorious for that kind of things.
Yeah.
So he's
Yeah,
I think he's one of
yeah.
one of the most protective composers for his own music that
Totally.
exists. So, yeah.
And it's worth it. But
Yeah.
I mean, what I want to say is that, like, you almost have like a budget price for a box set that has the least budget music ever made, in a way, which I think is, we don't, the fact that we can still find that box set that is still available is a privilege we have, because, like, from the collector side of things, there will be a time when that box set will be worth a small fortune. I know it. It's not like a wishful thinking, unless you keep it in print forever, which
no, actually, I'm not sure if I'm going to do it. But what I'm surely going to do after this podcast is I'm going to rise up the price.
Asshole. Yeah.
What I must also say that what I really like about listening to this piece from vinyl is that I can start. You can do it on CD as well, but I can start from I don't think there are many people listening this piece entire, like, very often. So
totally. Like, there's no need for that. If you feel like you will get a lot of, like, joy and like how you enjoy a record by just listening to one side. I'll tell you what, like the World Tune Piano box set of La Monte-Young from 86, I believe. 88. It's 5 LPs with about 40 minutes of music per side, which is very unusual for a vinyl record, but it actually works. It's great. It's one of my favorite records. There's still one side of it I have never listened to.
Wow.
Because
but can you tell me one thing? Because if there is 40 minutes on one side, so the grooves are probably super tiny. Did you notice maybe that they are they are getting destroyed or they are getting damaged?
Wait, what is getting damaged?
The grooves. The
No,
grooves. in the
No,
record?
no, no. It's not my experience. I didn't buy it new. I bought it secondhand. It sounds amazing, and there's really like, of course, these were made with a direct metal mastering technique, which allows for this kind of length uh, with good result. And for that kind of music, I think amazing result as well. So that I don't, in my experience, that's not an issue. When they did that for the Black album on Black Editions for La Montaigne in '69 or '70, I think there's a little bit of an issue there. That
Hmm.
like over
Okay.
time, that record like does tend to sound a little not as good. But yeah, it's
Yeah. It's shame it's not available. I would really like to have one that record, but yeah.
yes. And at the same time, it also makes it very special, which
Mhm.
builds up like the mystique of La Montaigne, which is kind of nice at the same time a little bit. Well, I say that I have it, so it's
It's nice for people that have the record,
yeah, yeah. I
but it's
have
very frustrating for people that don't the
come to
record.
Sweden. Come to Sweden, bring a good
I
bottle, and
will.
yeah.
I will definitely. I will.
But Morton Feldman is far from the only musician of like huge stature of in modern classical avant-garde music you've released. But to the best of my knowledge, all the other ones you've released, and we'll go through a few, they were still live when you started to work with them, which is very
Correct.
different from Morton Feldman. So how do you approach someone like Phill Niblock, who was a
I
huge part of the whole scene of the loft scene in New York with La
Yeah.
Montaigne, Yoko Ono, etc.?
Mhm. I didn't approach Phill Niblock. That was a friend of mine, the flute player. Who his name is Eric Drescher. He's from Berlin.
Hmm?
He plays this famous glissando flute, which means there is when you play the flute, you can move the part of the flute and you can make a glissando. It's very interesting. And he actually commissioned the piece from Phill and asked me to release it, and that was it. And on the B
Oh,
side, there is another flute player, Natalia Pchenikova, or things like. I'm not sure the name. And that was it. They basically commissioned the piece from Phill. They recorded it together, and they asked me to release it. And then last year, Phill asked me before he fell ill. He asked me to do a repress, and I did the repress, but unfortunately, Phill, yeah, he passed away. But repress is there. I have it here, and today on Stunty,
but
it's.
before you say that,
I'm not
let
gonna
me.
say it's just today. Right now,
Yeah,
it's the
yeah,
official release date of this repress of this wonderful repress
yeah.
of Phill Niblock.
Today is the official reissue release. I have almost every Phill Niblock record. There's a few ones that I don't have because I don't like them. There's a few I have because it was a learning experience, but they're not necessarily my favorite. Some of his music is amongst my absolute favorite music ever. This one that you just showed is you are so lucky because like you had a friend who commissioned a work from him, and that piece is absolutely fantastic. It's
Yeah,
really a great way to get into Phill Niblock. But not just that, even you can also not care about Phill Niblock and just enjoy this for what it is. It is. I'm so happy it becomes available again,
yeah.
and to celebrate that, what are you doing?
Should we announce it?
Yeah, yeah. Now we can
Okay,
say it.
good. All right, people. So the pre-orders are actually still going on of this record. So if you order this record,
From your
it,
website.
it sounds so painful. I sound like a business guy. It's so disgusting. Ah. But okay, the good part is if you order this record, so for people who watch this or who watched this podcast, once again, thank you very much. You get a free record from my sale, from the sale page of God Records. So if you go to God Records, there is a sale page, and there are some records that are really reduced. So if you order a Niblock record, you get one of the records from the page, one single record, on your own choice.
Can
Just
people,
write me Stunty and the record that you want in additional email, and the party begins.
and I put the link of the website in the description of the video.
And sorry for this advertising; it's so disgusting.
Yeah,
and it's
shameless plug.
It's totally shameless, but you know.
Yeah, Phill Niblock, he passed away last year. Like the record, the box that Bloom released a year and a half ago almost. The one I'm talking about, the red wooden box of double LP, like the reissue of that record that was unfortunately only released on CD, was like, it's a record that will that will be with me forever. Like Phill Niblock, these are his first two releases from the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. Yeah. And he's one of these guys who, he was there at the beginning of the whole minimalist scene in New York. And he was doing music back then, but life, and also the fact that the music industry, especially for that kind of music back then, they didn't have room for everyone to have their share. That's why Terry Riley was lucky to be one of the chosen one, to have like Columbia supporting him. Philip Glass had Philips, if I remember correctly. But Glenn Branca started his own label, more or less. But someone like Rhys Chatham was not as lucky. Someone as Phill Niblock was not as lucky. Someone as La Montaillon was not as lucky. But La Montaillon it's a different story. He's outside of that. But so just to have that record, which is a late composition by Phill Niblock, but like he only got better with time, in my opinion. so
I agree,
yeah.
What with Niblock, what's really to totally appreciate is this, that so much he supported so many people, he supported so many young people in his loft, and so that's really this, this let's say, like, back to the roots, like, okay, let's just gather into the loft and listen to and perform and enjoy. That's really phenomenal. But basically there were many composers like that. Like Schoenberg was also like that. He also, like, some of his works and Webern were also performed at their flats. And also Pierre Henry also did concerts at his own studio. So
in his house.
that's nice,
I went to a few of them. That was amazing. But Phill Niblock, he was also a photographer, and he did a lot of jazz records, artwork.
This is a photograph of him. He made this photograph. So that's his photograph,
which looks not like the stuff he was doing in the 60s with jazz, but there is a case to be made that the whole thing with Andy Warhol, he has something to do with that as well. But that's another and a long story. And I wanted to talk quickly also a little bit about Philip Jeck, which we alluded to. Philip Jeck, who also passed away not too long ago, who was doing avant-garde experimental music, and who started out quite early, like I think in the late 70s or early 80s. I have some recordings with him. And he basically is probably one of the first musicians to introduce the turntable as an instrument in music, in serious music. And
don't forget John Cage. Don't forget Imaginary Landscape.
That's true.
Like, that's 1939 even, I think.
So yeah. Absolutely.
Pretty early.
Thank you for like dumping on me. No, but so Philip Jeck did. This is a different kind of release you did, because these there's 2 volumes. I have the second one. I missed the first one, but this was originally released on Touch Records, if I remember correctly.
No,
but, no,
it's not. It was not released on Touch Records. The vinyl coda was released on one small. I don't know if it's small, but that was a label of Bavarian radio in Germany. I think it was called Intermediate Records or Intermedia. I forgot. That was the release from end of the 90s, and it was only available on CD.
Exactly, and these recordings became absolute classics of the canon of experimental music. Um,
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it ambient, even if it would be the easiest way to describe it. There is an aspect of it that is ambient, even if his like the intention behind it is completely different. But you can enjoy it as that if you want. Like there's like great harmonic qualities to the music, um, but there's a lot of challenging ideas as well, and it's a trip, it's a journey. These records,
Yeah.
and you did
For
a
me, that's the pinnacle of turntablism,
oh
definitely.
for sure.
That's absolutely, how he composed those, how he constructed this, because those are obviously improvisations. Uh, I Phil had this tremendous feeling for harmony. Then I mean, if you think about turntablism, if you are doing turntablism, and you have to think about musical parameters, which is harmony, rhythm, uh, overall form, and how he mastered it, and especially when you listen to those pieces like in one breath, like it's undescribable. It can, of course, it can be like an ambient. It can be also like music concrete. I mean, I think everything is there. It's just it's but how those pieces are constructed, it's totally brilliant. And his taste for loops, and his talent for like choosing which loops he's working with, and pitch modulations, and phenomenal. It's really, he was a big influence on Bernard Lang as well,
Yeah.
especially for his repetition philosophy and technique.
I would argue that for the people who have this fascination for the disintegration tapes, loops
Yeah,
from William Basinski, if you have that box set, the one record you have to put besides it is this uh, double, this set of two double LPs by Philippe Jeck, the vinyl coda, is yeah, it stands on its own feet compared to the disintegration loops by William Basinski. Even if it's different, very different, but it also shares a lot uh, in
definitely,
many ways. Yeah,
definitely, I
a new
agree.
ism, says Rufan here. Um, I wanted to, yeah. You also released some music by. Before we talk about that, like just quickly, how did you approach Philip Jack to release that? And was there any challenge to these releases?
No, he was totally easy. He
Mm.
was Phil was such a humble person, and totally open-minded. He basically left all that stuff to me. Also editing, I also edited things, because you have to cut the piece in order for vinyl sides. So he basically left it to me, and it was really totally easy to work with. I remember we met once in Berlin. He had a concert, and uh, I was wearing very orange T-shirts of one of my favorite bands, and then we met, and then he said, "Hey, oh, uh, I didn't expected you to look that shiny." Like because of the shirt or whatever. He was
Wh-
great person. He was
What was
such
the
a.
band on the T-shirt?
It was AIDS Wolf.
AIDS
That's
Wolf.
the
Okay, yeah, yeah, the noise
from
band.
Canada. Amazing band. The one
Yeah.
lovely, amazing. I love AIDS Wolf.
So yeah, you also released an album by Alvin Lucier.
Yeah, but that's not my record.
No, that's not because I don't have that one. So I,
Okay.
so it's
Okay.
just
I will check my storage. Okay.
no, but also a musician that was alive when you released his work and who has also fairly recently passed away. There's no correlation. Huh? Morton Feldman was long dead when you released his music. There were just like great composers who had long and fulfilling lives. So it's a celebration of them. But you had the chance also. It's just like I show that and talk about that to show that it, maybe a lot of that was chance. But when you look at the grand picture of that, these composers and their importance that like you managed to unite under one tent, the God record. Like, well, that's pretty cool, because if you think about it, how people like me, or people older than me, who discovered avant-garde experimental music through one label in the 70s, in the 80s, or something like that, people could discover a lot of history of electronic music, avant-garde, modern classical, just investigating the catalog of God records.
Thank you. I'm glad for that. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Well, that's why we're talking today, because yeah, you have your, but you also have your artists that come from various directions. And when I say your artists, I mean the artists that have mostly released on your label and who are
Mhm.
still alive, who are probably at the beginning of their careers or not far from that, hopefully for them. Like, we named Option, who did a
Yeah.
remix on your first record.
Correct.
There's this record that I find absolutely amazing. Like, I'm gonna play this on Friday.
Yeah.
The we and you have 3 volumes of Cowders
Correct.
on the label. This is kind of musique totale, in my opinion. And what else? There's so many here. Well, you have Le Penique.
Hmm.
Let me
Correct. Yeah.
show.
Very, very dear friends of mine and
Yeah,
very important people for my musical development. Extremely important.
you also have composers that are a little bit older but still very active. I played this one last Friday, which is a record. When I heard that, I had to order it. This is uh, like the quartz, no, the Wachstum Massenmör. The composition on
Yeah.
this one is genius. If
Yes.
people who are into the whole aesthetic of the orchestra being like a creature, an alive creature. You know how, like, the Beatles use, like, the orchestra tuning itself as an intro, and sometimes you enjoy that in itself and you want it to go on forever. He kind of does that, but with also like kind of an added cut up technique. But there's no cut up. It's actually the orchestra playing that way, and it's so strong.
Yes. Peter Amblinger is really one of the phenomenon. It's really amazing.
It's someone who I would argue that, unless you're really deep into that scene, and probably locally no one knows him, but his work is strong enough that, like, you're doing work for the future when you're releasing these records. You're also doing great work for me right now, and
Thank
hopefully
you.
for more. But
I'm not sure about the future because future is so transforming and then when I started the whole thing it was like a little bit more than 10 years ago. It Things looked a little bit differently. It's transforming all the time.
yeah,
So I don't know if those records are going to have an impact. They are, but now they are there. They exist. They are available. So yeah.
I mean, there are avant-garde experimental records by the dozens from the 60s, 70s that are not bad, but that are not exciting as well. And we've managed to, like, as a community of music lovers, connected or not, yeah, the good records find their way. But you
Yeah, of
also
course.
did release stuff from the past in a quite different manner. A record that I think that was the first record I bought from you, and because I was seeking out so much music by that composer out of curiosity, and you did the best possible curation, and I'm talking about this record,
Oh yeah.
which which is maybe the most important in many ways because of the origin of the composer, right?
Yeah, that's Vladan Radovanovic. He also passed away last year.
Oh my God, no pun intended.
No pun intended. Oh yeah. Also very, very amazing guy, a beautiful, humble person. About him, that record is actually a reissue of this CD.
Which is a compilation of various electronic
Exactly.
works that were spread out, either released or unreleased, through his career, and he's from
Correct.
Serbia.
He's from Belgrade,
Yeah,
today's Serbia, and he's probably the most, no, not probably, he's the most important avant-garde composer in probably in ex-Yugoslavia.
I would agree with that.
His duty is he established electronic music studio at Radio Belgrade in 1972. So that was a platform for that was very important platform for electronic music in the area, and many composers produced their pieces there. And he was one of the guys that I read only from books, and there were no recordings available to me. That was the problem, and I was like, his name was like enigma for me, like for years. And when I discovered this CD, okay, I gave myself kind of assignment. It has to be documented on record in any way. So I contact them very easily. We managed it. I met him also as well. We had a long
He must have had
discussion.
tons of amazing stories.
Yeah, of course, like every old people.
No, not every old people. I'm sorry. Sorry, old
Yeah,
people. You.
correct. Yeah, you're right. But yeah, those are people that really have something to tell you. I mean, and he also worked as an engineer. He also did classical pieces like
Yeah,
orchestra pieces, ensemble pieces, things like that.
but this
Um,
triple LP focused on his experimental electronic music.
this
He
is
had,
his entire electronic catalog
yeah,
is there. So it's very
yeah.
great overview of what he did. I think two or three pieces appeared. There was in ex-Yugoslavia, there were some labels that were releasing sometimes, very occasionally, they were releasing avant-garde composers. Those records are quite expensive now. The problem with those records is that they sound very badly. Some pressing plants in ex-Yugoslavia were very bad, and records are unfortunately for this kind of music totally unsuitable. So yeah.
I will say that I'm always favoring the originals. In this case, I have two compilations with electronic music tracks by him, as you said, like showcases. One actually sounds really good, and one I agree with you. Uh, I'm happy to have this. But
Yes, that was good. Yeah, that was. I'm happy for that. Yeah.
do you have, like, in this case, well, the CD already existed, and you did a favor to the world by allowing people like me to actually have a reason to own it because of my own issues with CDs. But
Yeah.
do you have other projects? Do you see yourself doing more of this kind of archival um, work,
Um,
maybe specifically to regions that are closer to you, that you might understand better than other people like me, for example?
um, yeah. To be honest, I tried. There is eventually one thing that I'm going to do from maybe electronic music from ex-Yugoslavia as soon as I find a little bit of time. The thing is, it's not always easy to find contacts for these kind of people. And to be honest, I put, if you noticed a little bit activities of Gold Records, I put it a little bit lower because um, I want a little bit to concentrate on my own things.
Yeah,
And right now, when I release something, it really has to be. Um, I wouldn't say good. I mean, what is good? I don't know what's good. It has to be something, and I need to have time and resources. So it's possible that I'm going to do something. We will see.
yeah. But to before we round it up, like, just to go a little more into these um, more contemporary artists that you've released in the past few years. Well, we named a few. Um, yeah, what would you want to say about these? Like, because for me, the music speaks for itself, and I would say that when I encounter God records, I encounter it because you have released records by names I know of, and so I sought them out. Some of them, uh, like this one, I didn't need any incentive to discover it by myself. Some took a little more effort. Some took a little help from you, some guidance as well.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm very grateful for that because I now believe that most of what I've heard on the catalog is um, stands on its own ground compared to the big names. And we didn't even talk about Laibach too much yet. The Flying Luttenbachers, Georhes Aperghis, but Georges Aperghis is again different. It's but or Gerhard Rühm. I mean, your catalog is just amazing. But yeah, these artists that you release, that you decide to release on vinyl record, do you consider that? Are you pushing them by releasing them? I'm saying, I mean that in a positive way, like
How do you mean pushing?
the fact that you offer them because of kinship, similar mindset, friendship, that giving them a label where they know until you are completely ruined, they have a home to release their work quite freely in a label that doesn't necessarily have yet much scrutiny, so that there's no pressure. And I feel that like there's not that many labels like that have given artists under a longer extended time the possibility to develop their own crafts. You have a band, a rock band, with quite a few of these guys, and if you will listen to it, and will listen to what they do uh, individually, what you do individually, like it is quite surprising to see that someone would get a chance to grow that far, like that big in a way. Because as I was telling you, like for example, the Powders record, for me this is like music total, like the way he managed to do all kinds of music at the same time, and it being very very meaty, very uh, filled with emotions, intentions, informations, and intuitions about music, and still feel also not something like a bad King Crimson record. It's really something that think a lot of musicians struggle to find any place that nurtures this potential. That's my take on it. Maybe it's something way more simple than that. And
No, it's great. It's great. It's great. It's great feedback, I think. Thank you very much for that. But those two examples that you mentioned, like Cowders and Lepenik, those are very dear friend of mine and friends of mine and collaborators. And I learned, I don't know, they expanded my not only my musical horizons. They completely transformed my musical approach, my musical, I don't know, whatever it is. It's just there for me. Sometimes I like to think of them as a perfect middle of, let's say, intellectual approach to music and intuition, like somehow in the middle, because they both have very, very specific. It's not really possible to describe with words, but they have really uh, specific views on music, approach, how they work on music, and very systematic most of the time, but not, let's say, yeah, maybe not plastic, or how should I say it? Yeah, those are really two people that are really like, and funny enough, there are some people that whatever they do, it's
Yeah.
interesting. It's somehow, and those two guys are really. It was rarely that they did something that I really didn't.
Yeah, you're just you feel just lucky to be in their presence, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Like every interaction with them, every interaction about not only about music, it's just about life, everything.
So
Great people.
quickly before we round it up, also can you maybe talk a little
Yeah.
bit about how you came to release some Laibach music, since Laibach are a band on mute, and the Flying Luttenbacher, also a band that I think a lot of people don't really know them outside of Germany. Um, and some of Central Europe festival scenes, but they've been around for quite some time, and we've released quite a few records of theirs, and some of their most like free ones. I would argue. Like,
Are
could
you
you
speaking about Laibach or are you speaking about Flying Luttenbachers?
Flying Luttenbacher? Yeah,
Flying Luttenbachers, yeah. I think I will say it very straight. Wiesel Walter is for me one of the most important composers today.
the leader of the band. Yeah,
Yes. So for me, that's Wiesel Walter is really, and I'm talking about his because he also has like multiple personalities. He's still very involved in improvised music. That's maybe a little bit that's something that's less interesting for me. But his composed music and Flying Luttenbachers is mostly composed music, or let's say they have couple of I think they have couple of periods. The first period was quite improvised, and then later he really started to do this very strictly composed music. He's also he's in Flying Luttenbachers are actually the later period is integration of Magma, King Crimson, and Olivier Messiaen,
yeah,
and a
and
little bit of Xenakis.
all of that sounding like, if you just listen to it for like 10 seconds, you would think that you're listening to a punk band, a free jazz band, an industrial
Correct.
band, all at the same time.
So
And there will be melodies that emerge despite all
right.
of that.
Funny enough, I had a talk with Wiesel yesterday evening, and I told him that Flying Luttenbachers for me it's contemporary. It's actually amplified contemporary music.
Yeah, people who love Zappa should love absolutely, even
Definitely,
if
yeah,
it's different, but like it's as strong a personality, and the music, yeah, it would definitely appeal to them.
yeah,
And you've released like some of their, I would argue, some of their most, I don't know if it's fair to say their best work, but certainly some of their most challenging
definitely.
stuff, in the best possible sense, in the sense that it's like they felt probably quite free doing these records. And then you did some Laibach, I think two
Yeah,
releases with them.
I did two releases with
Mm.
Laibach. My initial idea was to do something else with them, but it didn't actually fit to their concept. But before I talked about it, I consider Laibach one of the most important art collectives in. It's a little
Just
bit unfair to say in
before
popular
before we
culture, but
go into the music itself,
yeah,
maybe it's completely off, but for the people who don't know too much about European geography, including Europeans, like Laibach are geographically very close to you, if I'm correct,
yes, correct, yeah, yeah, correct,
because
correct. Yeah.
Slovenia is
Slovenia is a
like,
neighbor country of
yeah,
Austria. Yeah,
it's a super
it's
super small country, neighbor to a quite small country. So
but totally interesting. I have to say one thing about Slovenia. I was touring Slovenia with my band in 2000, and I was very young at that time, like 17 or things like that, and I was playing in a free jazz, kind of a tempo free jazz noise band, whatever. And I must say one thing: we went to we played in the cities when I got the tour dates. We played in the most. I didn't know any of the city. Those were actually villages. Like there is nothing. it looked like there was nothing there. But in those villages, like, I don't know, a couple of thousand inhabitants, there was, let's say, punk whatever club for punk music, for noise music, for everything, and people came, and that was one of my first cultural shocks, let's say, in Western Europe,
Yeah.
because, like, we played in, I don't know, it was nothing. It was like really some totally obscure cities. We played Ljubljana, of course, 2 times, and that was really amazing. So Slovenia is totally interesting, like very tiny, very small, but
Mm.
a lot of happening is there. And Laibach, it actually doesn't surprise me that Laibach comes from that. They also come from very tiny industrial city, and that's actually that their music is.
For those who don't know, quickly, Laibach are a very important band in industrial music, but not only, because it's unfair to label them as an industrial music band, in my opinion. They're famous because of their Beatles album, the White Album that they covered. Also, that they covered some like really famous like 80s like rock songs, and put them in perspective, in a totalitarian perspective of pop music in a very effective way. So they played with the codes of totalitarianism, which means that they were controversial. They started in the early 80s and were very quickly adopted by Mute Records in the UK, same home as Depeche Mode. One of their crowning achievements in art, because they are an art collective before being a music band. They were basically, Laibach is the music arm of a bigger art collective, which I
Correct.
guess, if you know nothing about them, to get interested to get curious about Laibach, you just, one little story. They went to Moscow, to the red place, like to the
Red
Kremlin,
Square.
the Red Square. Yeah, there were like 5 or 6 of them, maybe 8, and they drew a circle in the Red Square. Put them, then stood all in the middle of that square, very small one, took their passports and burned them, and declared the independency of that circle in the middle of the Red Square, which
Yeah,
tells you about the kind of minds these people have.
yeah,
Which you
correct,
gotta love that. You gotta love that.
correct. As I told you, and you told it as well, Laibach is. You can consider Laibach as a band. I don't consider Laibach as a band. I consider Laibach as an art collective with
Yeah.
different, let's say, points of interest. They are doing movies, and I kindly suggest everyone. For me, Laibach is
But by the way, quickly, like
yeah,
when Laibach did that in on the Red Square, it was before 91. Like
correct,
that. Also,
correct,
you, just
correct.
to put the scale right. Sorry, go on.
No problem. I mean, there is of course background why that was possible, but I'm not. Yeah, I will simply let people search a little bit regarding Laibach. Please allow me to show you one record that that was really important for me. Um, I saw Laibach in I mean many times, of course, and I saw them in the year of 2006. And at that time, they were presenting their records, which is called Folk. It's not available on vinyl still. I hope they
Not
are
yet.
going to
Not
release it.
yet.
Not yet. There is one vinyl. There is one maxi. Um, but what is interesting about this record and this concept, they were covering. The record is called Folk, which means nation.
Yeah.
Um, um, And what is interesting, they took 14 national anthems of imperialistic forces of the world, which includes US, UK, Germany, France, Italy, China, Japan, Turkey, Israel. Um, what else is there? I
Mexico.
No, Mexico is not here.
Well, they
But
had an emperor, and they were. But okay.
correct. Please address it to Laibach. But they took Vatican.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
And
yeah,
they took
yeah,
these anthems and reconstructed them and kind of rewrote lyrics. And this is one of the, for me, one of the most fascinating concepts in pop music. How they, of course, it's a little bit, let's say, there is a lot of irony there. There is a lot of sarcasm. There is a lot of, I felt like a lot of nonsense, because the Laibach, through their entire career, they are actually, I have a feeling that they comment, their career is like a big comment on, let's say, planet Earth,
Mm,
especially politics. Like they have records like NATO, Capital, uh, this record which is called Folk. Then what I really recommend, please, people check out their documentaries. They made a couple of documentaries. Uh, they made documentary about their tour through United States, and the documentary is called Divided States of America, and they show pre and post America when the George W. Bush was re-elected.
yeah,
And that's one documentary. The second documentary is actually a concert of this folk, which I totally recommend because it gives you an atmosphere to this concept, and the visuals were amazing. That's really. Then they have, of course, they were the first band that went to North Korea.
yeah. But you have to be better at it, because if you really say, like, if I have to advise people to check one thing of them, you should name the records that you released of them.
Listen, Laibach is something that's for me totally important. Laibach
Yeah,
is for my uh, let's say um, political globalistic education, one of the most important things that I ever experienced. Because
yeah.
somehow I learned through Laibach, I kind of learn how this world works.
There's a lot of men who have used and deconstructed totalitarianism, like conservative regimes and imperialism.
Mhm.
Laibach is probably, I would agree that Laibach is probably the one who has achieved it with the most success artistically. And the two records you've released, from I don't have them yet, at least. And what I heard from them was, wow, this is, because I'll be honest, there are some records of Laibach that are conceptually amazing, but maybe not the best to listen sometimes because of different like aesthetic biases you might have. But there
Mhm.
have some that I think are amazing. The one that they released on Asmus Titchen's label in the 80s, like with in Hamburg, is absolutely fantastic. And the records you've released, they are more edgy in a way, musically,
Yeah.
than a lot of stuff they've done. So I would really advise people to check them out. And
I mean, so
yeah,
for I always read some of their fans like making comments how they, or let's say they make protests about that
yeah,
they softened a little bit. But Laibach. It should be considered or should be viewed as a, I don't know, concept is kind of a small word. It's a construct. For me, it's a construct, and they only, I somehow have a feeling that they actually misuse music in order to present their own ideas. So it's Laibach is like, it's like a multidisciplinary project. It involves, as I said, please check out documentaries. Those are amazing, especially North Korea documentary. It's really, and of course their exhibitions and the records that I did. The first record was a live record with their reconstructions of their old material, And the second record was actually a very brand new studio record, which is called Sketches from Red District, and it one very hermetic, very dark and humorous record. Some people even wrote it was their kind of back to the roots, but that's, yeah.
Sean here, he says, I'm so glad you say that, Slobodan. I feel the same way. The group opened my eyes about politics of the world, particularly important as an American, which he is from Detroit.
Yeah.
Before I forget it, because someone asked a
Thank you.
question, Kaylee was asking you if you could remind us of the artist you mentioned that uses very low level sub-bass frequencies. Epsilon?
Option.
Option. Yeah, which
Option. Yeah.
which I'll
I mean,
play.
low frequencies. He's very. If you like Scorn, you will like that record because he's also a Scorn fan. But it's different than Scorn.
Oh, it's very different. But I think I see what
it has some very nice grooves and noises and atmosphere. So I like that. Also, amazing approach to electronics.
Yeah. We've been talking for already like 2 hours and 10 minutes, and I feel that like we could continue for a long time.
Yes, but Christian, may I please ask you, can we just be so polite to people, because I'm very glad that I'm here. I'm totally grateful to people that were listening to us. Maybe please to answer some questions and to just a little bit to use the opportunity to interact with people. That's important for me.
We keep talking a little bit, chatting, and now if people have actual specific questions or whatever, like feel free to ask, and we'll like answer right away instead of like trying to find a moment where the both of us are like suddenly silent. But well, people seem to
check a little bit. I will check a little bit the comments.
Yeah, you will be able to check them later. But yeah, we covered so much, and there's still so much to if we wanted. I think it could be good, like to have like a discussion, a public discussion about like how experimentation and experimental music creep in popular culture, because I have a lot of examples as well. So it would be quite cool. Here, Bodo, who's a great guy, he's he's commenting on Laibach as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and Jan is actually from Slovenia, so that's
hello, Jan. Nice to have you. Thanks for your attention.
Yeah.
What else do we have? Laibach is one of the few who understands. Yeah, that's what. Thank you, Vinyl Dream Escape. That's totally correct. There is interesting question. Please explain why they played The Sound of Music on tour in North Korea. The Sound of Music is very. I think it's a very famous movie there. So they know. I think if I'm not correct, please don't take me seriously. I think maybe some guys from Laibach are going to watch this. I don't know if I'm correct, but I think the movie Sound of Music is quite famous in North Korea, and they simply know the music. But of course, they reconstructed a little bit the music. So I think that's the.
I don't know if I agree with Gary here. He's guessing. He's not like avant-garde music. He knows about it, but he's a Beatles fan. But he's curious about things, and or avant-garde do they have less liner notes than mainstream albums? I
think that avant-garde albums have less liner notes than mainstream albums. Actually, no. I think they have more liner notes than mainstream albums.
Except for your records, because there's not that many liner notes in your records.
That's correct. I try to let people concentrate on music. So,
and that's one of the tropes of avant-garde music for years now, which was that like all these records had tons of liner notes since the 50s.
Yeah, correct.
To explain all these concepts, which I think has been detrimental to the music in some degree. For me, it's great. But imagine if you know nothing about it. It's completely alien. You also have this whole text to go through, and you think that if you have to, and if you don't do that, then you won't get the music. No, that's
in fact, some of those liner notes are pretty abstract and actually doesn't help you understand the music. For let's say music that for people listeners that don't read music or don't read Theodor Adorno.
Yeah. Or like I think like when you release albums by Aperghis and Gerhard Rühm, it's pretty good that you don't give too much context, because the music is very simple in a way, even if the ideas behind them are very complex and very avant-garde. But if you don't know about that, you can enjoy it for just the movement, the melodies, the fun. Because there is that's the dimension that a lot of people completely ignores, the fun or the cleverness that is fun in some of that music. And you don't, and when I say cleverness, it's all like it could mean intelligence, and that's not what I mean. So that's where we're limited with language, and music is the solution.
Of course.
So yeah, Rufen was asking you, this. Can you?
How would you handle a piano student who memorizes a piece of music the first time? To be honest, I'm not a piano teacher. I'm a little bit out of didactic tricks for that, but I can ask. Yeah.
And
there was an interesting thing. Wait a minute, I saw it. The artists need to survive in a capitalist economy, correct?
Yeah. And we have no choice but to live in that economy right now, which is maybe for the better. We don't, like, who knows. We kind of have ideas about that. Like Stevan wanted to like, to correct you a little bit that it was not banned in Korea. It was no, it was not banned in Korea and allowed them access to. About Laibach.
Where is that comment?
It's on the screen right now. I put it. If you.
No, it was not banned in Korea and allowed them to. I don't understand, to be honest. It was not. I don't know. What do you think?
Sorry. And this one, like, thanks to you, we learned that there's probably like a bootleg, like a copycat band of Susie and the Banshees in Yugoslavia in the 80s with a Q instead of a U. And 808 from Berlin here is asking if there's a connection between Susie and the Banshees and God. I mean, that's for you to decide. But if you listen to the Rapture produced by Brian Eno in '96, I believe, like, not many bands of goth music have managed to have a great album 16 years or like 17 years after their debut, I would say. So there is a God.
That's totally correct. That's totally correct. And Christian, thank you very much for mentioning Rapture of the Susie and the Banshees, because that's totally, that record is like kind of forgotten, and it's one of their.
It's their best album.
It's one of my top 3, and especially the title song. The title song is it's a wonderful symphony. It's such a wonderful symphony, and I'm a huge Susie fan. Right?
I get goosebumps just thinking about it. Susie and the Banshees, they have maybe even better songs individually than the ones collectively on the Rapture, but the Rapture as a whole album is their best album. No contest, according to me, at least. It's
amazing. It's totally overlooked record. It's really, and the title song, and there are some of the most wonderful ballads that they have on this track, like Forever. It's amazing. And the last song of the record, it's called Love Out Me. That's the best, like, last song of one band, because they disbanded afterwards, and that's the best swan song ever. That's amazing.
I think that will be the last question for now. And of course, it's a very complicated one, according to me, but maybe it's not. Do you like the Bergle Dugme, or are you into the Lenhart tapes dance?
I don't know what's the last one. The first one I know, and I don't like them at all. Sorry.
Can you? All right. Oh, Romuald here. Oh,
yeah. Should I show some of Yugoslav records that I like, or should we leave it for another podcast? I don't know. You have to tell me.
if you want, like, let's do it another time. Yeah, I think like
Yeah, sure.
that, like, there's a lot to digest. Like 2 hours and
Yes.
20 minutes. There will be people who
Yeah.
will watch it later.
I agree.
Again, people, like, go check out the catalog of God records, especially now. I would strongly suggest to consider this new reissue of the Phill Niblock record, which will allow you to get access to the arcans of the catalog, getting a record for free as well. Just write a little word with your order mentioning the stream. If you're watching this now or later, you can always leave a like on the video, thumbs up. You can also use, as usually, there's a link if you want to support the channel, the Ko-fi link if you want to leave a tip to your host of the night, or the day, or the morning, or whenever you're watching this. But the most important thing is really to give the thumbs up to Slobodan for all his great work, and a label that I think is not yet getting the credit it deserves. I think it's getting some, but it's a competitive market. Let's put it that way. And you're a teacher, an artist. You're not a communicator. That's not your job. So we hope we'll help a little bit with that, because and we'll do some more stuff.
Yeah, great. Please let me once again thank you very much. It was really interesting. Like we speak like 2.5 hours. It went really crazy fast. Thanks everybody for being here, for watching, for listening. Thanks everyone who ever bought any God records. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for listening to good music. And Christian, should we close the podcast with playing the Pink record?
Yeah.
That's how we agreed, right? Okay.
If I remember, this is the latest release on God Records. Secret release.
Thank you.
Bye bye, everyone. See you on Friday,
you
if not before, and see you soon, hopefully, Slobodan. And see you soon on the turntable, at least here. Bye bye.
Definitely. Thank you, guys. Bye bye.